Now to an update. Another arrest in the death of a rap artist known as Julio Foolio. Police in Jacksonville arresting 30-year-old Rashad Murphy after an overnight standoff at an apartment complex. They say Murphy surrendered. Tampa police had been searching for him and 27-year-old Davion Murphy. Right now, Davion is still at large on the run.
This crime scene remains in Jamila Murphy's mind forever. It's where her son, Joe-Rod Adams, was shot and killed after a Rains High School football game in 2018.
On her son's grave, News4Jax has obtained this video of the vandalism. The suspect is also seen knocking down the decorations and heard saying derogatory things. The grave belongs to Joe-Rod Adams.
I closed myself up in the house since his death. My family haven't been the same. That hurts.
And gunfire erupts inside a Northwest Side apartment complex. It leaves this 16-year-old. Neighbors say that the shooting sounded like a war zone.
Now, Robert Howard is sentenced to manslaughter and aggravated battery in Adams' death.
So it looks like we finally got some answers about who took out Julio Foolio, but it wasn't who everyone originally thought. The Tampa police had already arrested 3 people, with 2 still on the run, 30-year-old Rashad Murphy and 27-year-old Davion Murphy. But recently they caught up with Rashad Murphy, and now things are starting to make more sense. For a while,
He's compliant. Crawl towards me. Bro, come on. Keep crawling. Keep crawling.
a lot of folks were pointing fingers at young Ace. Given the long-standing beef between him and Foolio, it seemed like a logical assumption. Ace even dropped some diss tracks where he hinted that he might have been behind Foolio's murder, which only fueled the rumors. But with everything that's come out recently, it turns out Foolio might have been murdered for something that happened way back like 6 years ago. Back in the day, a 19-year-old gangster named Joe-Rod Jamel Adams, who went by the name Spaz, was murdered.
Hey man, these goddamn jits, man. Shot her right there dead, man. Fuck that shit at the school.
This crime scene remains in Jamila Murphy's mind forever. It's where her son, Joe-Rod Adams, was shot and killed after a Rains High School football game in 2018.
Spaz just so happened to be the younger brother of Rashad and Davion Murphy, who are pretty well known in the Gang 1200. Spaz's death was a huge blow to his people, but what happened afterward made it even worse. The ones responsible didn't just stop at taking him out. They went on to post videos disrespecting his grave and laughing at his death.
On her son's grave, News4Jax has obtained this video of the vandalism. The suspect is also seen knocking down the decorations and heard saying derogatory things. The grave belongs to Joe-Rod Adams.
I closed myself up in the house since his death. My family haven't been the same. That hurts.
Now, there are two versions of how Spaz's murder went down, one that the streets swear by, and another that the authorities put out there. According to the streets, the person who actually murdered Spaz wasn't some random shooter but Adrian Gaynor, who you might know as Bibby. Bibby was close with Foolio, tight like family. The word on the street is that Bibby pulled the trigger, ending Spaz's life. People believe this story because Foolio basically confirmed it in his music. After Bibby was brutally murdered by Hakeem Robinson, aka Queso, Foolio dropped a track where he mentioned Bibby was only 16 and already had a body on his name. For those who know, this was Foolio's way of saying Bibby had killed someone, most likely Spaz.
Them bullets flew past me, sometimes I wish they would've hit me. Like Lord, he was 16 with a body on his belt.
The thing about street stories is they usually have some truth to them. It's why a lot of people buy into this version of events. But then there's the official version, the one that made the news and was broadcast to everyone. According to that story, the guy who murdered Spaz wasn't Bibby, but another associate of Foolio's, a dude named Robert Howard, aka Kenny Caps. The police believe Kenny was the shooter, and that's the narrative they pushed out to the public.
Now, Robert Howard is sentenced to manslaughter and aggravated battery in Adams' death.
But when you break it down, both versions lead back to Foolio. Whether it was Bibby or Kenny who pulled the trigger, they were both tight with Foolio, which means Foolio was wrapped up in this whole mess either way. Spaz's brothers, Rashad and Davion, had been waiting for their moment to avenge their brother, and when the time came, they went after the person they saw as responsible, Julio Foolio. So now the question is, how did it all go down? Let's dive in deeper. Before his death, Julio Foolio was at the top of his game, but being the top dog in Jacksonville's rap scene also made him the #1 target. Foolio wasn't just any rapper, he was the most hated OP in the city. Practically every gang in Jacksonville had a bone to pick with him. ATK and 1200, two of the city's most notorious gangs, linked up to take him down. The beef between Foolio's KTA crew and 1200 had been bad enough, but after the death of Spaz, it escalated to a whole new level. Foolio's close ties to the people who allegedly took out Spaz only made things worse. As the leader of KTA, Foolio became an easy target, and everybody knew it. Let's dive into the events of that unfaithful night. Jacksonville's streets were already a war zone, but the rivalry between two high schools, William Raines on the north side and Robert E. Lee on the southwest side, added more fuel to the fire. These schools became infamous for their violent clashes, turning what should have been just another game day into a battlefield. It all kicked off back in 2006 when a 13-year-old was gunned down in a drive-by on his way home from a Raines game. The violence didn't stop there. In 2007, two students were shot after a Raines versus Lee game when someone fired off 15 to 20 rounds outside the stadium. Fast forward to 2012, and a fight after another Raines versus Lee game ended with a 20-year-old catching a bullet. By 2016, things had gotten so bad that the sound of a grill falling over during a game made players hit the deck, thinking shots were being fired. The following year, in 2017, players took off running in the middle of a game after some off-field commotion, fueled by rumors that something was about to go down. By 2018, everyone knew these games were a ticking time bomb. The authorities weren't about to take any chances that year. They beefed up security like crazy, with 30 police officers, 20 additional security guards, metal detectors, and wands. They thought that would be enough to keep things under control. Around 4,000 people showed up to watch the game. But by halftime, it was clear things were getting out of hand. A disturbance broke out on Lee's side of the stands, and the game had to be paused. Both teams were told to hit the deck right there on the field. Despite the chaos, the game continued, and Lee managed to pull off a win, beating Raines 16-15. This loss ended Raines' 13-game winning streak as state champions, and it was a bitter pill to swallow for their fans. But the real trouble started after the game. As most of the fans were leaving and the teams made it back to their locker rooms, gunfire erupted outside the stadium.
Yeah, we are just now getting confirmation from JSO that this is going to be a triple shooting. 2 people injured, 1 person is deceased. Let me step out of the way here.
The bullets was going this way. I know which way the bullets was going. Everybody was running, and they was right in this area right here, was shooting. Pow, 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 pow.
And this was after the game?
After the game.
The scene was chaotic. Officers found 19-year-old Gerard Adams shot in the head near the ticket area, and he was pronounced dead on the spot.
Thanks, man. These goddamn jits, man. Shot her right there dead, man. That shit at the school.
A 17-year-old male was also shot in the arm, and a 16-year-old female took a bullet to the foot, a wound that would leave her physically disabled. The police scrambled to piece together what happened, and one of the victims pointed the finger at Robert Howard, also known as Kenny Caps. At first, this victim claimed Kenny was the one who shot him, but under further questioning, he admitted he never actually saw Kenny with a gun. Instead, he talked about an earlier dispute where Kenny allegedly said, "Somebody's going to die tonight." That statement stuck with the cops. Then, 2 more witnesses came forward, and their stories painted a clearer picture. One witness said they saw Kenny with a gun the night of the game and even saw him confront Gerard in the courtyard after the game. This witness didn't see the actual shooting but heard the shots about 25 seconds after they started running away. They later identified Kenny in a photo lineup. The second witness had an even more damning account. She personally knew Kenny and claimed to have witnessed the whole thing. According to her, Kenny confronted Gerard, pulled a gun from his waistband, and shot him in the head. As she ran away, she heard more gunfire. When shown a picture, she also identified Kenny as the shooter. Multiple shell casings were found at the scene, and tests confirmed they all came from the same gun. Detectives started putting the pieces together and figured out that a fight had broken out between Kenny and Gerard during the game. Both of them got ejected from the stands but managed to sneak back in. That's when things turned deadly. The detectives believe Kenny targeted Gerard and the 17-year-old male, shooting them both. The 16-year-old girl was just unlucky, getting hit by a stray bullet. Kenny was only 16 years old when his mugshot was plastered all over the news. He was arrested at his school and charged with first-degree murder and 2 counts of attempted murder for the triple shooting. The sheriff's department later confirmed that the shooter and both male victims were all associated with known criminal street gangs. Kenny, the accused shooter, was from the north side of Jacksonville, the same area as Rains High School. On the other hand, Gerard Adams, the victim, was better known across Jacksonville by his street name Spaz. He came from the east side, repping a hood known as 1200. In the aftermath of the shooting, rumors spread like wildfire about what really went down that night. Another name kept popping up, Adrian Gaynor, who would later be famously known in Jacksonville's drill scene as Bibby. According to speculation on Reddit, Kenny and Bibby were together that night and supposedly got into a fight with Spaz and his friend Will. The word on the street was that Bibby might have been the one who fired the fatal shot that killed Spaz, while Kenny shot Will. But somehow, when the dust settled, only Kenny was identified by witnesses. It took a long time, 1,353 days to be exact. But eventually, Kenny pleaded guilty to reduced charges of manslaughter and aggravated battery.
Robert Howard is sentenced to manslaughter and aggravated battery in Adams' death. He was originally charged with second-degree and first-degree murder, but it was reduced after eyewitnesses recanted their statement.
The charges were downgraded due to issues with the witnesses. Seychelles, a local interviewer, later spoke with Kenny Capps, who opened up about how the witnesses cooperated with the police but refused to testify in court.
You received the news that the witnesses didn't show up. I mean, do you remember where you were at when your lawyer told you that these witnesses they're not cooperating?
I was in my, I was incarcerated, so I was in my cell. I was thankful for God. Just what I need. This my freedom on the line. So just patience and a lot of praying, a lot of faith.
In the end, Kenny was sentenced to 15 years on a split sentence, meaning he had to serve 5 years in a Florida state prison, with the rest of his time to be served on probation. Given the time he'd already spent in county jail, he only ended up serving 17 months in prison before being released. Some folks might say he got off easy, but nothing in life comes without a cost. While Kenny was locked up, tragedy struck again. In 2019, 16-year-old Bibby was murdered at the Hilltop Apartments. Bibby was just a kid, barely old enough to have lived life, but his association with Julio Foolio painted a target on his back. Before he was people close to Bibby had tried to warn him that his life was in danger. A week before his death, his close friend Therese Powell, better known as the rapper K Shorty, tried to talk some sense into him. At the time, K Shorty was behind bars, but he still managed to reach out to Bibby, telling him, "I see you out here with Foolio, but don't get caught up in that. You know how bad they want him, and they'll get anybody just to hurt him."
Before he died, a week before he died, I called him on the jail phone, and I see you out there. If you turn, I see you with Julio, you going, I'm like, but don't get caught up in that, bro. You know how bad they want him. They'll get anybody just to hurt him.
Those were the last words K Shorty would ever say to his friend. On the morning of February 25th, 2019, Bibby went to school like it was just another day. He attended Grand Park High School, ironically the same school where Julio Foolio had been shot as a teen. After school, Bibby did what he normally did. He checked in with Foolio at his grandmother's house, where they usually hung out. But on this particular day, something changed. Instead of staying put at Foolio's grandmother's place, Bibby decided to head over to Hilltop, a spot where he felt comfortable in the hood. Foolio tried to look out for Bibby, telling him to be safe before he left. But Bibby shrugged off the warning and headed out anyway.
I'm like, look, bro, it's hot outside, like the police. I ain't even thinking about no, like, I ain't even talking, like, bro, the police out there, bro, like, don't walk nowhere, bro, sit here with me.
It was around 2:30 p.m. when Bibby made his way to the Hilltop Village apartment complex on West 45th Street. He was there to visit a friend, or so the story goes. But as soon as he arrived, masked suspects who had been trailing him pounced. They caught Bibby off guard and chased him to the back of the parking lot. According to eyewitnesses, they fired multiple times, hitting Bibby and ending his life in an instant, just before 3 p.m.
Eyewitnesses are telling us now that Gaynor was being chased to this exact spot where he lost his life.
The 911 lines lit up with frantic calls, describing what sounded like a full-blown war zone erupting in the parking lot of the Hilltop Village apartments. When the police arrived at the scene, they found Bibby lying in a pool of his own blood, lifeless. The news of the tragedy hit Julio Foolio hard, like a punch to the gut, leaving him overwhelmed with grief. His family was devastated, plunged into a state of shock and trauma. Bibi's mother in particular was shattered, uttering the chilling words that when her son died, her life stopped too. She confessed that she doesn't even feel alive anymore, a haunting reminder of the brutal reality that comes with the gang lifestyle, where retaliation is the norm. And too many young lives like Adrian Gaynor Jr., better known as Bibi, are snuffed out before they even have a chance to really live. In a twisted, heartless turn of events, members of rival gangs took to the internet to mock and taunt Julio over Bibi's death. Hakeem Robinson, who goes by the rap name Queso and was allegedly affiliated with ATK, was one of the most ruthless. He showed no remorse, flaunting guns in videos, posting clips where he laughed at Bibi's murder, and even going so far as to rap about Bibi's death. Queso didn't stop there. He even mocked Bibi's mother, who was desperately seeking justice for her son. It was a cold-blooded display of the toxic mentality that dominates this lifestyle.
You had to leave. Why you ain't stay with me? With me. Why you had to leave? Bibi.
Bibi's mother spoke out about the horrors they endured in the aftermath of her son's death. Those allegedly responsible for Bibi's murder didn't just take his life, they desecrated his memory. They spat and urinated on his grave, mocking his family every chance they got. Queso took the disrespect to a whole new level when he used Bibi's image on the cover of one of his music projects, alongside other rival gang members he allegedly killed, and shamelessly posted it online to promote his project, which he disrespectfully titled Bibi Out. The cops were determined to solve Bibi's murder, and after nearly 2 years of gathering evidence, their investigation led them straight to Queso. By that time, Queso was already behind bars, facing charges for another hit, which was rumored to be retaliation for the murder of his own brother. Crime seemed to run in the family, with Queso, his father, and his brother all caught up in the same deadly game. Queso was on the brink of getting out on bond for his attempted hit case when the hammer dropped. He was charged with first-degree murder in the killing of 16-year-old Adrian Gaynor Jr., aka Bibi. That's when the chilling details of Bibi's final moments came to light thanks to eyewitness accounts that were documented in police reports. According to the witness statements, Queso and his affiliate, Whitaker, drove to Hilltop that day, cruising from one side of the complex to the other before parking in one spot for about 20 minutes. Eventually, they spotted Bibi and another guy named Pratt under a gazebo. That's when the deadly plan was set into motion. Queso and Whitaker exited the vehicle, both armed and ready. Whitaker carried a long AR-style rifle, while Queso had an AR pistol. Whitaker chased after Pratt, while Queso went after Bibi, firing shots as he ran. Bibi, realizing he was in serious danger, tried to protect himself, but eventually, he fell to the ground, covering his head with his hands in a desperate attempt to shield himself. Queso, showing no mercy, ran up close and shot Bibi in the back of the head or neck, sealing his fate. After the cold-blooded execution, both Queso and Whitaker returned to their vehicle, a gray or silver Nissan Maxima, and sped off. With these first-hand witness accounts, along with surveillance footage and numerous online posts where Queso bragged about the investigators had all the evidence they needed to charge him with first-degree murder. The footage that later surfaced online shows the moment officers informed Queso that he was being investigated for Bibi's murder. The gravity of the situation finally sank in, and Queso was visibly shaken, caught in a state of disbelief and denial about what was happening. But reality hit hard. Before the footage ends, you can hear Queso mutter the words, "Everybody pray for me."
You don't know who that is? Bibi ring a bell to you?
I want to speak with my lawyer.
You want to speak with your lawyer?
Yes.
Okay.
OHE dead. Everybody pray for me.
The same guy who allegedly pulled the trigger was now pleading for saving grace. Funny how life works. Meanwhile, over in Kenny's world, things were heating up. On July 24th, 2024, the feds dropped a bombshell announcing that the 22-year-old was being indicted on 2 counts for distributing over 50 grams of meth. If he gets convicted on both charges, he's looking at a mandatory minimum of 10 years, but it could stretch all the way to a life sentence in federal prison. The case against him was pretty airtight too. According to the affidavit, it all started on June 11th when an undercover ATF agent slid into Kenny's iMessages. They struck a deal. Kenny agreed to sell the agent half a pound of meth for $850. Fast forward 2 days and the ATF, teaming up with detectives from the Jacksonville Sheriff's Office, set up a joint operation. They geared up the undercover agent with audio and video recording equipment, along with $1,300 in cash to make the bust. At around 1:30 p.m., the undercover agent pulled up to an address on Polk Avenue and sent Kenny a text to let him know he had arrived. Kenny came out, hopped into the passenger seat of the undercover's car, and handed over a white bag in exchange for the cash. After a quick chat, Kenny even offered to sell the agent some coke at reasonable prices. By 1:35 p.m., the undercover agent was heading back to the briefing location with the evidence in hand. Later, back at the ATF Jacksonville Division office, they downloaded the audio and video footage to a compact disc. The video showed Kenny, clear as day, making the deal. There was no mistaking him. Kenny was easily identifiable, and the feds confirmed that the house where the deal went down was his residence. The bag he handed over weighed in at 272 grams and tested positive for methamphetamine. Basically, the feds had Kenny in a tight spot. They caught him red-handed, and with the video evidence and everything else stacked against him, there wasn't much room for him to fight the charges. It was like the feds set up a perfectly calculated trap, leaving Kenny with no choice but to plead guilty. But here's the kicker. Why did they wait so long to arrest him? They had him nailed down on June 13th, yet they didn't swoop in and make the arrest until July 24th. During that window, Julio Foolio was on June 23rd, and Kenny ended up violating his probation. It's almost like the feds were biding their time, waiting to see how Kenny would react given his track record. Now, switching gears back to Foolio's case, new details are emerging that paint a clearer picture of the events leading up to his death. In freshly filed documents with the 13th Judicial Circuit Court in Hillsborough County, it's revealed that Foolio's murder deeply rooted in an ongoing gang war in Jacksonville. According to the documents, Julio Foolio was a prominent member of the 6-block gang out of Jacksonville. The suspects in his murder, Rashad and Davian Murphy, were part of the 1200 gang, while another suspect, Isaiah Chance, was a documented member of the ATK gang. On June 23rd, the 4 suspects arrested in connection to Foolio's including Chance's girlfriend Alicia Andrews, tracked him from Jacksonville all the way to Tampa. They followed him through the city, tailing him from one strip club to another, before finally catching up with him at a Tampa hotel where they executed their deadly plan.
After leaving Teasers, the rapper went down the street to Truth 18 nightclub for an after party, posting on social media in live time.
This is the video here from his Instagram.
That club shows how 2 suspect vehicles continued to follow Jones, just as they did at Teasers, and eventually to the Home 2 suites near USF.
They're approaching the victim's position on foot.
Show 3 shooters firing several shots at the vehicle Jones was riding in.
The recently obtained affidavits detail how the group's night began at a pool party at an Airbnb in Holiday. However, things took a turn when the owner realized they were way over the occupancy limit and called the cops, kicking them out. From there, the so-called entourage headed over to Teaser's Gentleman's Club where Foolio was paid to perform. The night didn't end there though. They continued to an after-party at the Truth 18 nightclub, but the violence followed close behind. The tragic shooting that took Foolio's life occurred in a cluster of hotels near the University of South Florida, USF.